All right, so let's go back to where we were. So these are logical operators. I'm not sure we discussed these yesterday. Essentially, you're going to be using them in conditionals. There's two, technically three here. Trying to think of how, like, this is more verbose than this is. These are kind of different. I don't like that they put this here. This is different than like a logical operator is typically used, like the ands and the ors. This just means the opposite of whatever it's worth. So like this would be the not operator, so it's not false, which would evaluate to true, in the same way that not true would evaluate to false. Whereas up here, if I was doing a conditional where I said if the sky is blue is true, or the sky is, or pardon me, or the sea is purple is true, then run this code. Obviously the sea is not purple, but since the sky is blue, it would run because it's an or, right? So run if the sky is blue, or run if the sea is purple. Since this is false, we have the or operator here, and we're able to evaluate this, which is true. Up here, if I tried to do the same thing where I said the sky is blue and the sea is purple, it would end up being false. It would not evaluate because these both need to be true in order for it to evaluate. Whereas down here, either can be true. The sky can be blue or the sea could be purple. Whichever one it is, it'll still run. Up here, the sky needs to be blue and the sea needs to be purple. So this is the and logical operator, and this is the or logical operator.
So you use that top one for a login and password. If the login is true and the password is true, then that should run.
Pretty much, yeah. Exactly, yeah. Showed you guys these a little bit. So the same way we were doing like plus equals, minus equals, this is just greater than, less than or equal to. Obviously 7 is equal to 7, so that's true, but it's the same way in math. I always remember it by less than kind of looks like an L, right? Like if you tilted an L on its side, it's, kind of looks like that. So that's how I personally remember it. I also hear people consider this like a monster and it's eating whatever's more. I just like to think of this as an L, and so I'm like, oh, that's less because it's an L. That's how I personally think about it. Down here, we're talking about the equality operators, so that's what I was trying to think of earlier. Again, here, we're checking the data type and the value. So even though the data type is the same here, the value is not the same, so that's false. Here, the data type is the same and the value is the same, so it's true. And then, of course, 3 is not a string on the left side, so that's false because we're checking with this third comparison operator if the data type is the same. If this was just 2 comparison operators, then this would be true. There is, so before how we saw that not symbol on not true, it's essentially the same way with the comparison operator. So 4 does not equal 3. 3 does not equal 3. 3 does not equal the string 3, right? You can also do this, if I'm not mistaken, with just a singular equal, but that would only check the, let me see. Just want to check this before I tell you guys. Let's just do that. Comments on comments. Oh no. Okay, so false. So you can do a singular equal, but it does still evaluate the data type. I actually didn't know that myself, so that's good to know. So I guess it doesn't matter if you do 2. Wait, what? Oh, I got my brain mixed up. So it did work how I expected it. So we're thinking in like double negatives here, so I apologize. This is true because we're asking the computer, is 3 not equal to the data type of 3 of a string? That's true. This is true. These are not equal. The reason why it says false here is because it is equal, because it's no longer checking the data type. So I remove that data type check by only having the 1. This is true. It does not equal the string 3, but this is false because 3's value is equal to the value of 3, regardless of whether it's in a string or not. So I just wanted to show you that you don't always need those 2 if you're having problems with data types. Right here. Same thing, probably should have scrolled down, but at least you got a working example. The doubles, blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, so real quick to touch into falsy and truthy values. There's certain like values in JavaScript that associate with like a certain type of Boolean. So that's why you're seeing right here 1 is true, because 1 evaluates to the Boolean true in a comparison against another Boolean. It's a really weird part of JavaScript. It'll probably have you run into some errors because of that. But there's time, like 0 is false. 0 would be considered like if you said if this variable is 0, then log this is false, and it would evaluate it as if the 0 said false. So it would be considered a falsy value, and then we also have truthy values in JavaScript. I need 2 hands to type. Right here is a Stack Overflow kind of discussing this. Using the below sample data, I've read other threads, but I'm still confused. If variable a is equal to 0 and variable a is equal to 10, which is equal to 5, what? Don't do this. Bad code. You always want your expressions to be single line. This is like he's declaring the variable in the same line he's comparing it. You don't want to do that. That's hard code to read, and you want all of your actions to be separated. Doing stuff like this, you'll definitely start to run into errors, because then the tendency becomes to, instead of just declare the variable and then doing all of your work down here, the tendency becomes doing all of the work on the variable up here, which you don't want to do. So like instead of this guy putting 5, like if he had more complicated stuff to do, he might be lazy and start writing it in the variable declaration on this line, which is like a huge no-no. So whenever you're declaring variables, always just leave it like this. Don't compare it to another variable. This doesn't make sense. This seems like he just assigned it to false. I don't know why you can just put that in. One more time? Yeah, I think he's trying to show that this will evaluate the false, but yeah, it's a weird example, but we'll go to the answer. 0 is falsy, so right here, yeah, this is not true, so that's falsy. That's what we were talking about. And then any non-zero number, including negative numbers, is truthy, except 0, right here. 0 is falsy, so 0 would be considered a false Boolean. Any non-zero number would be considered truthy. And this is kind of, a rabbit hole that you guys don't need to worry about too much right now. But just understand that sometimes you might run into that where a 1 would be evaluated as true, and now you know why, because JavaScript under the hood associates these hidden values to those data types, where if it's needed, it will turn itself into, it would coerce itself into another data type, another value. So we have some complex comparisons. This is horrible to read. When using the AND operator, if the first expression can evaluate to false, the expression is returned. Otherwise, it will return the second expression. When using the OR operator, the first expression can evaluate to true. The expression is returned. Otherwise, it will return the second expression. So yeah, like I said, AND is both sides. So this would need to be null, and 10 would need to be greater than 1. Or we can have 1 less than 0 and false equal capital false. So that's false. That won't work. Null and 10 is, that seems okay to me. Not false and 1. So it looks like the middle one here would actually run, depending on the code, the circumstances I'm seeing here. But yeah, you'll probably not see too much code written like this. You use these in comparisons. Well, yeah, there you go. You use these in conditionals as well, a lot more than any other place. So this is, you're not going to see this in the wild. But we are on quiz time. Anybody know the answer? Awesome. And that's because true has the AND operator on the end of it, which means we need to evaluate this, and JavaScript observes PEMDAS, so it actually evaluated this first. It did the parentheses first, PEMDAS. So it said this expression needs to be false and true. So that evaluates the false because it's false. Like false can't be false and true. So then finally the computer is running true and false, which again evaluates the false. What does this evaluate to? People agree? Cool. Yeah, for a second I was like, I just looked right here. This is the one that gave it away for me. When it was multiplied by 2 versus multiplied by 1, I was like, this one's got to be greater than. That was my thought process. Oh my gosh. Okay. What about this one? We're using modulo. I have no idea where modulo occurs in PEMDAS. Would that be division? Probably division.
That would make sense.
Yeah, because it's the
0 is greater than negative 499. True.
Ba-boom. Nice. The numbers are evaluated before the comparison is done, even without parentheses. So, I mean, I think that the division occurred first, then probably the subtraction, and then finally the comparison. The numbers are evaluated before, I don't know what this is talking about.
So 36, and then the modulo 6, that's 0, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then 0 minus, it's actually, it's a mathematical equation, so it's negative 499, right?
Yeah.
That's what I get. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it does the comparison.
Oh, before the, okay. Yes, okay, thank you. Teaching me. All right, well, how about this one? This is a tricky one. Because we're comparing the value, not the data type. If we were comparing the data type, this would still be false because the value is not the same, but we're comparing the values. This could be, if you want to, you know, just abstract for a second, this could be a number, hello, right? Like, and as long as the value is the same, this would actually be true. But since we have the different character, and we kind of discussed this with UTF-8, this is not the same UTF-8 code as this H. So the computer evaluates these characters as different codes, essentially. Haha. I mean, I can already look at this and know exactly. It's kind of, it's right there in the middle. It's right here. We're adding on that extra check to see if the data types are the same. So immediately my eyes went here. I said, okay, we're checking the value and the data type. Then I was like, okay, that's a number, that's a string. And I immediately, like, I didn't have to do any mathematical operation in my head. I was just like, there's no way this could be true because we're comparing data types. Aha, I like this one.
Will you have to hit check answer to go on to the next module?
I think when I, oh, yeah, whoops. Thank you. Sorry. This is a fun one. I like this one. You're more than welcome to like try this on your computers too. Like I wouldn't consider that like cheating. Like I definitely encourage experimenting. Okay, yeah, yeah. You guys are here to code. You're not here to just like listen to me. Anybody have an answer?
If those 3 equal signs.
Exactly, yes. I'm glad that you guys are getting that now. So the value is the same. We're not checking the data type. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Did you run it on the side?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Smarter, not harder.
Yeah. So the way I work through this in my head is left to right, just like the computer, right? How we all read. So false, I was like, okay, well that's probably going to evaluate to false. Or true, right here. I noticed, I did the math in my head. I was like, okay, I know 3 times 4 is 12, but 3 times 3 is 9. And then how many more do I need to get? I need 2 more to get to 11. So I knew that this was true. And then over here, I didn't even bother with that because I knew that it would evaluate to true. If the first, to go back to what we were talking about before, I accidentally kind of brisked over that. If the first statement in an OR statement is false, it will go to the next one. So that's why this is true, is because it's looking for a true value with the OR operator. It's saying, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? That's what the OR operator is doing. It's looking for a 1. It's looking for the go-ahead, the true value. Since false is here, it immediately gets skipped, and then this gets evaluated to see if that's true. And since it does end up being true, that's what's returned. Yeah. Shorter way to say it right there. Cool. We're almost done with comparisons. Then we're on coercion. Maybe we could brisk through that one since we talked about it quite a bit yesterday. Anybody have this one? This one's super tricky. Oh, and there's even more. What is this? Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Let's go back to REPL. Holy moly. What the heck is this? Oh my god. Okay. So true and false and true equals true, or super duper not defined. I don't know why there's 2 there. Maybe the data type as well. I'm just gonna Google that real quick. I've never seen that ever, and I'm curious as to if that's a typo. Ran and it went fine, huh? I think that's some JavaScript magic. I don't think that's supposed to work. There's not a single example of 2 exclamations being used. It's right here. So,
When you type in true, it kind of tries to explain for you.
oh, okay. Da da da. Okay. Why is separating it like this is useful? Well, each statement is separated. Separating it like this is useful. Oh yeah. I thought they were talking about this. I was like, that is not useful. But yes, breaking it apart like this. That's what I happened to do, right? Like, I didn't even type in the correct answer yet. The first thing I did is I went and I broke down the data to make sure I knew what I was looking at. So try to adopt that yourself. Try to, when you get like a massive amount of data, try to format it in a way that makes sense to you so it's easier to work with. Let's see. In the second part, the double bang will convert any value to its Boolean representation. Undefined on its own is falsy, and therefore undefined would be truthy. Adding an additional, oh, so it's, yeah.
That look of like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Gotta have a talk with this guy, man. What the heck?
Maybe they did it on purpose just to show you jacked up coding and what not to do.
Yeah. Hopefully. Because I mean, this is like meant to teach you. This is meant to help you learn. Like, yeah. Like even I was like, I've never seen this, and now I know why. Because it's completely redundant and pointless. Cool. All right. Chugging all along. False, null, undefined, and number, string, not a number. Type of, we used that yesterday. I was kind of showcasing that. I'm going to go ahead and do that one for you guys. I gave the answer of this one away earlier, but I want to see if you guys remember. It's kind of yeah. It's kind of counterintuitive. If you recall, I was talking about how not a number may be still represented as the data type of a number, whereas the data itself is not a number, but in the way it's used, it gets turned into NaN because of a mathematical operation or something. And so JavaScript considers that a data type of a number still, even though it's technically not a number. So yes, the type of not a number is a number, and the type of 42 is a number. Like I said, developers suck at naming stuff. We are not great at it. That's why we have Java and JavaScript, which are 2 totally different things. Ooh. Anybody know the answer to this one? True?
Let's say false.
Are you sure? Is that your final answer?
Is there a space in there?
Actually, an empty string defines value. It's essentially like null, if you want to think of it that way. It's showing that there is some sort of value here. The value is null, though. So null is not undefined. Yeah. this goes back to that thing I was talking about with like truthy and falsy values. Like an empty string in JavaScript is considered like a truthy existing data type, regardless of if there's information there or not. Because like if I came in here and I said, pardon me. Oh, well, let me declare the variable first. Var test equals empty string, right? And then we do console.log test.length. We'll get 0, but I'm able to do operations on it because it exists. It's there. It doesn't hold any value that we find necessarily pertinent, but it's still considered a value. The value is just null under the hood. Let's see, actually. False. Yeah. Like, you can just think of it as being null. JavaScript probably isn't going to follow along with my example, but if you want to just think of this as being null, that's essentially null. It's defined, it's not undefined. Oh! Holy cramoly.
I didn't know this, I had to look it up.
The answer seems obvious, which is why I'm kind of like, is that the answer? I'm gonna click null?
Nope.
Okay.
Object.
Okay. Let's have some fun with that. Wonder if I can console log the null constructor? Why did it turn green? I'll do the, is it keys? Nah. Object, methods, JavaScript. Again, I have not memorized these. But let's see if we can't pull the keys off of this object and get it in the console. What? This keyword. Get object keys JavaScript. Object dot keys, and then you throw it in there. That's right. Okay. There we go. Object dot keys. We'll wrap null. Okay, let's see if we can't figure out what null looks like. Cannot convert undefined or null to object. I thought it was an object. See how JavaScript can be confusing?
What were you trying to do?
So before, we confirmed, I will run this one first. We confirmed that null is an object. Yet, when I try to console log the keys, so like before how when, I'll just show. So these would be keys on an object right here. Where's my mouse? Right, denoted with, we have the name of the key, the end of the name of the key denoted by the colon, and then the value, which is a function inside of an array, and then finally separated with a comma starts the next key. So what I was trying to do, I was like, okay, what's null? Null is an object. So I looked up object methods, and I found the object keys method returns an array of a given object's own property names in the same order we get with a normal loop. Cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at the keys of null. Well, we can't because it's undefined or null, and we can't convert it to an object.
But it is an object.
Yeah. Yeah, so welcome to JavaScript. That's just one of many weird things that you'll probably find in your travels with JavaScript. So there you go. It's an object, but it's not an object. Anybody know this one? Oh, I'm not checking my answers. Thank you. All right.
Is it really cheating if you have the tools in front of you?
No.
I was telling him, I have the assets. I'm going to use them.
Exactly. I think this could be one or two things because I don't know what's going to evaluate first. So I'm curious as to what you guys think this will be. You're going to guess number? Number? Cool. Okay. My second guess would have been object because this is an object right here. We're grabbing the random key off of it, so I was wondering if maybe it would do this object, but it ended up doing the actual output of the function in the object. So cool. Template strings. We went over this yesterday. I showed you guys that the proper way to insert variables into strings is by using the $sign with the curly braces instead of having to do this horrible Frankenstein concatenation monster. This is certainly valid. You can do this, but if it starts to look like this, if you have like 3 variables, that's probably pushing it. You probably want to start using string templates if you're starting to concatenate more than 3 variables. That would be like my rule of thumb, I would say.
Where would we find string templates like that, or is that something that will just be committed to memory eventually when we do it enough?
That would be so like if I was trying to hit a server, or you were writing your own like endpoints for your server, what you would do is you would say if you know client request true, right? Whatever, pseudocode. Then you would do let me think here for a second. Redirect. This is not a real thing. Well, it thinks it's a real thing because but it would be undefined. That's why I changed color. It's not actually declared. This isn't a real function. Redirect to google.com. Oh, sorry. So, oh yeah. This would be an example of where you would use them. So if somebody's trying to log into your website and you evaluate that the client is who they say they are, then you would redirect them, and then you would use a template literal to insert their like user associated ID to redirect them to their page. That would be that, and that's actually probably the most common use of template strings. This is probably what you're going to see more often than not, is stuff like that. Otherwise, maybe if you're making like a web game, like an HTML game, maybe, you know, if you had like a prompt, you might see this in like some of the prompts for the person put for the game. But other than that, yeah, you're probably not going to see them outside of like networking stuff and like games if somebody wanted to make like a web game. Primitive tabs. So I had I can certainly go through and, you know, declare a variable for every single one of these in order to pass. If you want to, that's awesome. It's fun. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come over and bring this into, let's pump this up. I don't know if I can actually. I can't. Darn it. That's really small. Can you do a control find on REPL? I want to show you guys a useful trick. Oh, you can. Nice. Okay, there we go. Let's take that data. Oh, I should already have it on my clipboard, right? Do control find. And now I know every single one of these ends with a semicolon. So what I can do is find semicolon. All of a sudden, all these are highlighted. I never showed you guys how to do this, by the way. We drop this down, and then we replace it with a space equals high. And then we click replace all, and now we finish the challenge. I just realized I'm recording myself doing this. So never mind. Should appropriate.
Have 13 seconds of missing audio.
Should have numbers were specified. Should fit their constraints. Okay. Well, tried cheesing it. Got far. Should have a complete made-up name. Because it caught on to me trying to cheese it, and so actually this is great. This is tests. These are tests right here. This is what I was talking about before with test-driven development, and this is what it looks like when you have passing and failing tests. So this is actually what a lot of major companies have going on behind the scenes with a lot of their functionality on their websites and stuff. They have these tests where it's like, okay, this URL should, properly redirect. This should return as an integer. This should be, here, blah, 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 blah. This would be test-driven development. So some developer wrote these tests specifically for this exercise in order to make sure that the person's doing it correctly. So it failed because the person who wrote the test is saying that should have a complete made-up name. I'm guessing that means there should be a space in there. And then right here it says should have numbers were specified. So we just come in here, 1, 1, numbers, number less than 6, 1, number between, oh, that's a string. There we go. Okay, so that should do it. There we go. So then it prints out the thing down below, but just to show you guys, if you don't want to waste your time, because as I just showed you, this is kind of redundant. Like, this isn't really teaching you anything. It's fun. Like, it's fun to see like everything after you type it in, because Mad Libs. But since it's an exercise, I just wanted to show you guys a little easier way to complete it if you didn't want to sit there and go, this equals this, this equals this, this equals this. Like what, 30 times or so? Yeah, 20. So if you want to do it, go ahead. It's fun, by all means. Otherwise, feel free to do the trick I just showed you. Assign the variables to the values so that the following statements evaluate as described. Oh my God. Wow.
I was take the loss on that one.
Yeah. Coding React is harder than this, or easier than this. Let's see what it says. Should resolve to true. Should resolve to true. I didn't even do anything and 2 of the tests passed. Okay. There you go. Run the tests first. So all I have to worry about is this third expression. So m at n length.
Is that m times n? Because it's in
No, it's so M should be an array. M is an array, and then the length would be added to the length. Oh my gosh.
Zero plus one equals one.
Let's do 1 for M and 0.5 for N.
One more time.
Do 1 for M, number 1, and then 0.5 for N. Can you do it?
Yep. Put a 0 there. I have a feeling like as I do this, then the other tests are going to start breaking. Ooh, it didn't like that. Oh, there we go. Expression A. Oh, we're looking at the wrong expression. Dang it. Expression A is the one. Yeah. Sometimes you can come in here and you can do this. What is it? There's a way where sometimes you can cheese the tests and have it show what it's running through. Should resolve to true. Okay. Well, I don't want to waste too much time on this one, and it's intended for you guys to do on your own, so I'll leave that one for you guys to do, and I'll move on to functions. I'm sure I could do it, but I don't want to waste anybody's time while we're all here. Let's see, so we have 15 minutes left. We have functions, conditionals, loops, arrays, objects. So we discussed arrays. I'm sure that will just, go over a lot of the stuff that we had already talked about. Objects we talked about. Native array and object methods, I've been talking about that this whole time. That's like all of the dot, push, dot length, those are methods. So like these 3 units right here, like we've essentially gone over all of these. So don't worry about that too much. Comparing reference types, don't forget reference types are arrays and objects. So this discusses comparing arrays and objects. Down here we're talking about arrays and objects, error handling in JavaScript. The accumulator pattern has to do with loops. So I will go over loops and I will go over functions. Functions I think I might want to touch up on tomorrow again, just because they're essentially the bun to the cheeseburger that is JavaScript. They run everything pretty much. So functions are important, but honestly all you really need to know is there's 3 parts. I don't want to, I'm recording so I don't want to draw it on the board, but I'll do it over here. Grab all those, comment them out again. So the first part of a function, and we can actually drag this over, pump that up, move that over, cool. So, can I type clear? It's not a real terminal. So over here, the 3 parts of a function are, first of all, the declaration, right? We have the special keyword function with the name. So we have the function, we have decided to give it the name with the name here, and so now the computer knows we are declaring a function, we're calling it with name here. In the second part of a function, see how automatically it turned it into purple? Because now it knows I'm writing a function now that I've opened these parentheses. These parentheses signify parameters. If that's not how you spell it, parameters. And so you'll hear this a lot. Parameters and arguments are almost interchangeable. They're not, but they're almost. And it's, again, developers suck at naming stuff. The difference between parameters and arguments is parameters are when you're declaring the function, arguments are when you're calling the function. And I'll show you guys an example of this. So A would be a parameter in this instance. So would B. This is the second part of the function, right? I'm declaring the parameters that this function will use in order to execute its logic. Now I will open the curly braces. This is the code block that the function gets to work with. This is where I'm going to declare all of the functionality that the function will do. So curly braces, I hit enter. Automatically, it brings this curly brace down below because it knows that I need this line in order to write logic. And you would do something simple as return. There always needs to be a return. Well, actually, there doesn't always need to be a return, but we discussed this yesterday where if we don't return it, then we can't do anything with it. Console log is ignored by the computer. If I did console log A plus B, and I did with the name here with 1 and 2, and then I did var test equal to, let's just copy, paste, why you do this? See how it's undefined? So, I'll show you real quick. Where's this second 3 coming from? I guess it's doing it in here too. So what's going on is I declare the parameters of the function here, the second part, and then the third part is I declare what the functionality, the logic of the function should be. But you don't need to always return something. However, if you want to use the data later, you need to have it return. That's what I'm showcasing here. This is the undefined. Line 157 and 158 is where we're getting undefined because I'm not actually returning a value that I can save. I'm just console logging it, which again the computer ignores. So instead of console, well actually I could just leave that. If instead of console logging, if I return A plus B, now that undefined will be gone. So 3 parts of a function. The first part is where you're actually declaring it and naming it. The second part is deciding what parameters you're going to be using inside of the function. And then the third part is the code block upon which you will execute the functionality that you want your function to run. And so finally, I call the same function with the 1 and 2 arguments. So these are arguments. These are parameters. Again, they're like almost interchangeable, but there is that slight difference of arguments are when you call the function, and parameters are when you declare the function. You can kind of use them interchangeably. People will still understand what you're saying, but technically the proper terminology is parameters for declaration, arguments for calling. And then finally, since we're returning, we can actually save that value inside of a variable, and then when I finally console log it, then we do have a reference to that value being returned outside of the function. So this would be like, I guess, 3.5. This would be the third part additionally to the function inside of the code block where you have this return keyword where you can actually save that information now. So we're at 822. So here again, first part, you don't need parameters. You don't always need parameters. If you're not using parameters, you don't need them. This is very simple. You can call it without arguments as well. It returns undefined, and that's what we were seeing in REPL before when I was just console logging stuff. We kept seeing that green undefined because it's not returning anything. But that's fine because we're just console logging it. That's what it's meant to do. So here we have a function, right? A function called say my name, write a console log statement that says my name is Ada, but use your own name. Pretty simple. If my computer works with me. Function, first part. They want it to be called say my name, and knowing that this is written with tests, I'm going to call it exactly say my name because I know that that's what the test is expecting. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. And it looks like it's probably just looking for my name is and then additional characters. So that should probably work. Expected my name is to match, I guess it wanted more characters. So again, the way the tests are written, you have to keep in mind that's not the compute. It's not like the AI god like that has come down to our plane of existence and is like writing all these tests like it's a human. So humans are imperfect, and so are tests. So just because the just because the test is erroring out doesn't mean you're necessarily doing it wrong. It may be that the person who wrote the test didn't consider something that you're doing, and so your answer is correct, but technically the test is wrong. So if you run into an example, if you run into something like that, just take a break, like Slack me or something like that, let me know, and we can discuss it, we can bring it up in class. But just expect that, because I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, there are a couple really odd tests in this curriculum where it seems like something should work, but it's looking for something very specific. So if that happens to you, don't worry about it, just move on to the next one. It's not a big deal, and we'll go back over it in class and all that.
Very, very quick.
Yeah.
You said you run into something to Slack you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a window? Because last night you had a do not disturb. When?
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
Oh.
When should we or shouldn't we? Like, what's a good time? When is a good time? 'Cause I sleep during the day.
Okay.
I work at night, so.
With Slack, it'll still pop up when his hours are available. So if you send him a message and then he gets on at like 8 a.m., your message will pop up to him. It just won't notify him when he's on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when he gets the message, I'll be sleeping. That's what I'm saying. So.
I can address it like I'm probably not going to be available 24/7. I typically sleep in a little bit later myself, but don't expect me to respond right away. But like if you're running into a problem that's not like dire, right? Like you're not going to get dropped from the course because you didn't tell me about a function not working within 8 hours. Like that's not going to happen. If you have trouble, you're running into something and you're like, I feel like this should be working, but it's not, shoot me a message, and then like whenever I'm available, I'll respond to it. But don't just like give up. If you can, if you're feeling motivated, just continue on to the next problem, and just keep working from there. And then eventually, I'll finally get back to you and all that. But yeah, I would say don't expect immediate responses, but expect that I'm on there frequently enough that I can probably help you guys out. Since the class is only 2 hours, right? I mean, there's 22 other hours. I spend 8 of them sleeping, but the other whatever, you can obviously reach out to me, and I will be more than happy to help you guys out, or write it down so we can address it in class. Everybody's in Slack, right? Cool, awesome, yeah.
I'll get there.
You're not in Slack yet?
I have one. I misunderstood his other notes. I made the account. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And same thing with the. We're supposed to send you that paper through there, right? No. See, I just got that yesterday because she had the wrong email. But what was it?
I'm going to.
The paper that